All right. Hey, Valentine. I have another resume here to review. Valentine's trying to get into technology. He doesn't have a professional experience of background in tech, but applying to a few roles and then also getting some certifications. And so reviewing his resume to kind of go over, what could be improved and what looks good. First off the bat, this header's okay. I would make your name a little bit bigger up here. The blue font calls it out a little more, but it needs a little space. It needs a little bit of space here to breathe. Like this is like the top of the border here, so you could give it a little more space. Maybe even like reduce some of this. This is interesting. I've never seen that at the top. I don't think you need to call it like the actual like banner on there. It also like at different zoom levels, it doesn't really scale very well. So let's just include that down at the bottom and then clean up some of the space. Give your name a little bit bigger area and make that stand out a little bit more. I want it to be the first thing I see when I open your resume. I redacted location or phone number in email, and location was right here, so that's good. Those are the three things I want to see first, and including these other profiles, other things that you want to highlight. If you have a personal website, a link tree, LinkedIn, anything you want for this recruiter or manager to see, this is the place to call it out right at the top, because that's where they're going to reference it over and over again. This is also, it's a 2-page resume, which is pretty good, but we could make it a little bit shorter. I also like to see like your work experience is way down here at the bottom. I know you don't have relevant tech work experience, so we're gonna address that in a second. But this professional summary, like, don't show me this out of context of when you're learning this stuff. I want to see when you're applying these skills, when you were learning this stuff in like some sort of timeline. This is a lot of bullet points to include at the top. I don't If I'm seeing 20 of these a day, if I was a recruiter, like I'm probably not going to read all this. I'm going to skim this and try to find the highlights and pick out the technologies that I'm like, oh, this might be relevant. But this is a lot of information right at the top, when really what I want to see is some experience, education, something you're trying, that you're doing, that's getting you more into the tech field if you don't have relevant work experience. But there's always relevant experience. Tech isn't about just tech. Tech is about people. It's about customer service. It's about communication. So let's not forget the fact that all of these tech skills are great, but end of the day, you're going to work with people and you're going to work with projects and companies. So having that process in mind is all relevant. So we can call that out from other jobs where you may not think it's relevant, but it is. Solutions architect and training. Okay. So here's cloud practitioner cert. Choosing publish it with object-oriented program with Python. Experience develop virtual machines in Azure. Fundamental understanding concerning secure, high availability, basic knowledge in cloud migration, rehost platform databases and web applications. Basic understanding of open source orchestration for modern applications. Architecture, okay. Fundamental level of understanding of cloud security, ability to work on multiple tasks. So these are all like, I mean, maybe this is better than like a word bubble of a bunch of technologies. But what I typically want to see is I want to see when you applied some of this stuff. Is there a project? Was this a training course? Was this something that you had impact at a company? Like, this is information that I want to know in addition to some of the stuff, as well as some sort of scale. Like, I think this is too much information to include in a summary of professional experience. Let's go down and keep going. 18 and 21, you got Master of Science. Full funding. I don't typically like to include or even care about GPAs. Some people might, but really, like, it doesn't matter to me. If you went through the work to graduate and you went here, it was a priority for you. Unless you were like, valedictorian or something that was like amazing for like the top 1% of the class, like I don't care. Conference published 2 science papers. That's kind of cool, seeing published papers. This whole section though, I typically put at the bottom. You also don't call out. You say up here your essay and training, but you don't say courses you're taking or this is where I would call out certificates and courses and things that I'm doing to continue my education, and not just like the formal stuff. Relevant soft skills. Okay, this is a whole bunch of words. that mean nothing to me unless you have some data to back that up. I want to see this stuff down here in the work experience. I don't want to see it as a list of words, because you can write. Okay, that doesn't tell me anything. You can write a book. That tells me something. You can write research papers. That tells me something. You don't need to include it twice. If I saw that you published 2 scientific research papers, I'm going to assume you can write, and you don't need to actually call that out. Again, like, a lot of stuff is so soft with no data. Multitasking. All right. Like, what does that mean? Like, does that mean that you could deploy Kubernetes and Azure VMs at the same time, or does that mean that you go to school and have a family at the same time? Like, different scales of like what that means and how that applies to a job. So here's your training certs. Okay, a lot of times I would try to connect this directly to education, either in the section itself, or closely tied to it. Like, this section right here is just distracting to me. I don't really care for it in the middle. Don't tell me, so I see a year here. You don't need to say completed. You don't need to say in progress. If this is in progress, tell me 2022. Don't tell me, those dates. Like, I actually don't care about some of that stuff. I can assume based on the dates that you're working on this stuff still. Okay, so here's work experience. August of this year, food and safety. Attain quarterly objectives signed by management, responsible for identity and critical staff, perform cross-functional R&D, sales, finance, improvement, collaboration, help onboard. So this is all, these are tasks that you did. You do need to give some more space here. This margin is like almost nothing. But you're giving some information about things you did, not outcomes, what you're doing, or any sort of metrics or scale of how you're doing it. Help onboarding new employees. That's cool. Was this 1 employee a week? Was this 500 employees a month? That matters, actually. And then how much are you helping? Are you actually mentoring people? Is this an ongoing 6-month process? Give me some data, give me some metrics, give me some scale of what you're working at, and then how that relates to other people possibly. I like that you keep these short, because they shouldn't be more than 2 lines, but I want to know some information and data about it. Even though these aren't tech field related, guess what? If you work in tech, you're still going to get, where was it? Quarterly objectives assigned by management. You're still going to get, you're still going to have some operations and sales. Like, these are still cool things to call out, but I want to know, like, what the outcome of you doing these things were. Did you improve a process anywhere? Did you automate something? Did you write documentation that 100 people use a day? Those are things that are cool because I can see what impact you had at this company that someone else may not have had. And also tells me why I want to hire you versus someone else. Let's jump to page 2. Some of these things are also, again, these are, switch. There are a lot of tasks. Why did that happen? Come on, mouse. There are a lot of tasks for something that's not, again, it's not directly related to the job you're trying to get. So it's a lot of things you did. It tells me that you can follow instructions. It tells me that you might need some guidance in this role. Like, that's fine. But just know, like, if you're applying for an entry-level role versus like a mid or senior level role, a mid or senior is going to assume that you went out and took these initiatives and did this yourself. Source cheaper and alternative ingredients that replace existing expensive ones. Cool. How much money did that save? Tell me. I want to know numbers here. How many ingredients? Was that like 50% of ingredients? You just like, we found cheaper ones. We saved $1 million a week. Amazing. Like, if you did initiatives on that, like, tell me those metrics. I want to know that. Prepared, processing for quality, secure. So like, it's like you pass. Like, this is probably a work required training. I wouldn't even include it. This is something that, like, yeah, you could follow compliance. Cool, but not necessarily relevant to like what impact you had at this company or things you created or helped with that made the company better. Increase conformity of good manufacturing 15% training. So I don't, again, like, this is good. I like the number here, but is this better than other people? Is this like, was this required? You're increasing it, so that's good, but I actually don't know what that applies to. So this might be something that you have a number, so I might ask you about it in an interview, but not necessarily like, okay, I don't know enough about that because I'm not in the food industry. I don't know what the requirements are. Cool. This probably right here, support R&D activities, 2 new products. That you could probably tell me about how many teams you worked with, how long was that process. This tells me more about your communication skills than you at the top telling me I have good communication skills. I want to know here how many teams you worked with, how big was that team, how long was the R&D process. If you worked with any technologies to collect data, to analyze data, feedback, that sort of stuff, like tell me some of that information here, because you applying your skills, your knowledge, whatever it is you said at the top, to an actual, like, I did a thing, that's more important to me. Research and product development. Scientists, spearheaded food product development. I built and presented customized product solutions for clients. So again, like, I want to know, like, how many clients did you talk to? How many clients was this? What technologies did you use to collect that data? How were you custom? Was this like a slideshow? Did you go give a presentation, or was this actually like you made packaging and you like did other things and changed ingredients? Responded effectively to requests for proposals. How many? What was this? 100? Was this 1,000? Like, give me some data. Like, why was that important? How did that have impact? These are cool things to call out, but these are just tasks. Like, these aren't telling me a lot of how you drove some innovation or how you had impact. And I also see, so we're back in 2013 now. Personally, I don't go beyond 3 jobs or 6 years, whichever one comes first, unless it was something that had like a big impact on what I want to do. Or I could summarize it really shortly. I like that you only have 3 points here, but you probably could leave this off. Unless there was a bullet point in here that's like, oh, actually, I see this is actually the first relevant experience, and I just blocked it out because it's so old ago. Like, this was 12 years ago, but you had 300 PCs you're managing on VPN. You're calling Office 365. Like, that is good. Like reduce some of this one then, if this wasn't relevant to what you want to do, and then highlight this one a little bit more. You can guide me in what you think is important by how many bullet points each of these are. If this one is 7, 8 bullet points and this one down here is 3, it probably tells me that you're a little more focused on this job and what you did here rather than this job, even if it was long ago. So you can guide me a little bit by shrinking some of those other jobs. Let's see. Engineers Without Borders, 2013. Mobilization experience. What is this? This is probably volunteer work. I don't actually know. Like, I don't know what training and knowledge mobilization experience means. Because here's volunteer. This is also really what you get, leadership in all caps, but everything. Well, these are all cap letters, but that one's big cap. I don't know. Maybe some formatting issues there. I don't know. I don't know what this actually, how this is different than this down here. I like that you have at least a little bit of information on here. Again, if you have some stats on like led on-campus engineering project, how many engineers, how did that impact something? Give me a little more data here, or just a number that you remember or had. I mean, again, these are pretty long ago, so maybe they're not as relevant or you don't have that information, but we could, you can figure out something to let me expand that without having any background in that, why this is important to you to share and what you learned here. Leadership experience, McDonald's campus graduate student society. So approximately 100 new grad students. Cool. That's good. Call that out. If someone else did 500, like tell me like a percentage too, like 100 maybe. Well, I guess you probably worked on a team, so this probably doesn't have like a competitive aspect to it. But if you were in like the top 2%, those things are good to know. Interest, extracurricular. Some of this stuff, like a lot of people, like this is cool to you because it like humanizes it a little bit more. I don't tend to include these things a lot of times unless it was something that like I learned from it. I mean, it's cool that you're doing soccer. You like, community development, like those are neat, but those are things that you can bring up with the recruiter or with your team as you're interviewing. Putting it on a resume to me just kind of takes up more space, and because I love keeping my resume to 1 page, that is super important to me, and so I leave off as much as possible. If you have the room, it's okay to include, but again, like I look at this gap here, borders on this stuff, like this is really tight. Like you probably want to leave some extra space at the bottom of the page here, and maybe exclude a few things. And again, probably some of these bullet points. But I think the biggest thing for if you're trying to get into tech, like these technologies, this is all good. I don't know how you're using this. Obviously you're not using it at your job. Are you working with open source projects? Are you doing independent like side projects? Like when are you learning this stuff? What are you doing it and like with it, and at what scale? All things I actually want to know. And even if you don't have like a job doing this stuff, if you have a side project, if you have something where you learn something, call that out. That's totally fine to say like, work experience isn't just necessarily like the things that you had a contract to work somewhere. Work experience can be, a lot of like open source or a side project or something you did that like I built all of this stuff for my, GitHub something project. You can go see the website here. Here's the things I learned. Here's the things I accomplished. Here's how much traffic it drives. Even if you're not making money, like that's okay to know. I want to know some of these skills and what scale you're working at. And then why, okay, even if it's an intro job, like I see all these buzzwords. This is great to include, but I need to know how you're applying this stuff. I see down below you have good customer service, you work together on a team pretty well. There's some things in there that still apply in tech for sure, but then some of these gaps on like, what are you doing with these things? How did you debug this stuff? Call out 3 or 4 of them. Of just like, you don't need all of these. Call out 3 or 4 like really cool things that you're like, oh, this project had like 10 different technologies in it, and then tell me about that in a little bit of a story, not a story, but like highlights. Let me skim it still. So, but I think again, if you're getting into tech, a lot of great information on what you're learning and showing me that you're continuing to learn. But I just want to know like how that applies to what you've done in the past and why I want to hire you for someone else that's also learning some of this stuff.